Star Wars, the expanded universe. A universe so vast that has over 17,000 characters from various different eras, from Dawn of the Jedi to the Old Republic, to the prequels all the way to the Legacy era. This is the tale of over 17,000 characters throughout the Star Wars universe. This is our first step to a much larger world that exists in the Star Wars universe.
Hello everyone, Darcenovia here. For my 50th episode, I'm going to review the books that pretty much brought an end to the Phantom era of Star Wars. Spectre of the Past, Vision of the Future. Originally going to be 12 books in the Bantam era. Of course, we all know there's more than 12 books. Timothy Zahn was intended, according to the Reader's Companion, because that's where where their source came from. He was always intended to write the finale to the Bantam era. Now, to some Star Wars fans, this is the end of their timeline. This for them is how the expanded universe ends. This is where everything comes to a close. I don't feel that way, but this is one potential point where I feel like if you stop here, you're not really going to feel like you missed out on much, like you would if you later in the timeline. I feel like this is one of the few spots in the timeline that it's a good place for the expanded universe to end. But it didn't end that way. And you have novels that came after it, which I've already talked about those last year and most of this year. So, yes. Now, what do I think of Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future? I think these are really good novels. Then again, has Timothy Zahn wrote a bad novel in the Star Wars Expanded Universe? I don't know. Now, in some countries, this is actually a trilogy because Vision of the Future, if you go by the paperback, is almost 700 pages. And in some countries, it was split into 2 books. So, yes. Now, what's the story of this? Basically, just be prepared if you're reading these novels. It's heavily political, these novels. There's a lot of politics involved, but in the grand scheme of things, it makes sense. A document came out that put the Bothans in a bad light, which caused the entire galaxy to basically, be mixed about the Kamas issue, which there was a group of Bothans in the past that basically sabotaged their shield generator, which caused the Kamasi to lose, their home planet, and basically their race is pretty much endangered. And there's mixed on what needs to be done. There's a group of senators that want to punish the Bothans, and there's a group of people that don't think it's fair to punish an entire race based on the actions of a few. But it's much more complicated than that. And old feuds that the creatures throughout the galaxy using the Kamas issue as an excuse to actually enact these. Now, the stakes of these novels are really high because, this is the closest the New Republic came, other than the Thrawn trilogy, to being destroyed. And it could have easily been destroyed during a civil war, which a civil war was threatening to break out. Now, how does the plot go? I'm not going to spoil it because I want those who haven't read these books to actually not have spoilers at least as little as possible. Now, the plan for this was for Luke and Mara Jade to get together, and I'm positive they had to go through George Lucas, because there's no way that they could have done that without getting his approval. Now, what do I think of these books? I think they're really good. I think it's a good ending to an era, and it also sets things up for the new Jedi Order series. I feel like this is a good way to end the 90s era of the Star Wars expanded universe. And a year later, the Bantam era, which I think is better than Del Rey is better than Bantam. Yeah. Now, unless you've read a good chunk of the New Republic era, you shouldn't read these yet. You should the requirements. You should at least read the Thrawn trilogy, Jedi Academy trilogy, the Sarisia trilogy if you want to. I have yet to read that. The Canolian trilogy, I Jedi. Well, you don't have to, but I'm just listing trilogy you should read before reading this, and maybe some of the X-wing novels, and you'll get the most out of it. Some of the things they talk about, the nods to other events that happened earlier in the timeline. Now, Timothy Zahn masterfully does something that some people didn't like about the Dark Empire trilogy. He did his own retcon and have Mara Jade. Basically, it explains why she wasn't there in those comics. Because if you read those comics, after you read the Thrawn trilogy, you would wonder, why isn't Mara Jade anywhere to be seen? Well, this book explains that. And it does it well. It does it in a way where, I don't feel like it completely undermines what the person created. It actually gave another character's point of view, what she feels about the issue. Because Timothy Zahn, it's no secret, he did not like Dark Empire. Of course, Dark Empire is a touchy subject amongst even expanded universe fans. There's some of them who don't like it. I don't mind Dark Empire, but I'm not going to talk about that. I think the retcon for Luke and Mara was brilliant, because I felt like, for those who didn't like those stories, it gave a good explanation on those events. And the thing that Timothy Zahn does well, which I mentioned in my Thrawn trilogy review, is all the characters that were involved in the story, they all, get the same amount of screen time as you would expect them to get. They all are useful. Each character doesn't feel like they're just there. He utilizes all the characters that other people created and he created and George Lucas created very well. It didn't feel like some authors in the Bantam era, which they had a huge boner towards Han Solo. It wasn't like that with Timothy Zahn. Everything was balanced. And that's one thing that Timothy Zahn does do well. He really does. Timothy Zahn is considered one of the best writers for a reason. Now, in my humble opinion, this is not going to be popular with EU fans. I think these are better than the first set of books that Timothy Zahn wrote. Honestly, I really do. And these are some of the, if I had to rank some of the best novels of the 90s of Star Wars, these would be very high on the list. I felt like the tension, I felt like the stakes were the highest they've ever been at that point before New Jedi Order. Because up until this point, things didn't really, there was that much tension really in these books, because you kind of knew that the heroes would get out alive, but yet an intergalactic incident which involved in the Bothans, which you have one group who wants to punish them, another group that doesn't, and a bunch of other people are just using that as an excuse to, politics is very complicated. It really is. And unlike the prequels, which I don't hate the prequels, I feel like the politics made a lot of sense in these books. And realistically, in an intergalactic setting, yeah. Now, what can I say about these books? They haven't been said. I think they're great. If you've read everything up until this point, I would recommend reading it. But then again, you're watching my channel. You're going to expect me to recommend these books. I give these a classic rating. I think they're really good. They're some of the best, in my opinion, that Timothy Zahn's wrote. And I feel like it's a great ending to an era of Star Wars. Now, if you don't want to continue the expanded universe, at least read past this point, it's a good ending point for the timeline. In my opinion, it's one of the few good ending points, because after New Jedi Order, there is no good ending points for the Star Wars expanded universe. Or Star Wars in general. There's Return of the Jedi, Vision of the Future, and the Unyielding Force. Those are the three ending points. And this is a good ending point. It really is. Would I consider this the end? No. To be honest, I view the entire expanded universe as one big story. That it ends when the last story was published. And yes. Now, after this, there's one more novel that Timothy Zahn wrote that I plan on reviewing. But after this, don't expect to see as many books that involve post-Return of the Jedi, because that's my favorite era. You're going to mostly see stories that take place in the prequel era. So that's what we're going to see for a lot of next year. So have a good day, everyone, and may the Force be with you.